Good morning, my creative friends. Dr. Minette Riordan here. I missed you guys. I'm going to switch my camera here just for a minute. Hello. Lovely to see you all. I am recovering from a cold, so I apologize for if I sound a little stuffy. I am, and maybe a little coughing, but I'm at the tail end of it. I feel good. This is my only live session for this week. I was away on retreat last week, and tomorrow I head down to Denver for an amazing Funference, which is a women's business conference, part of an organization I belong to called the Dames. But I wanted to start today by telling you what we're going to do in October. I cannot believe it is October already. Can you? And a couple of years ago during the pandemic, I had this desire to read more poetry, and I wish I'd brought the book that I tangled back then. And it happened to coincide with what's called Inktober Tangles. So if you're not familiar with Inktober, Inktober is a month of prompts that are drawing prompts that are intended to be drawn in pen and ink. If you look up the hashtag Inktober on Instagram or just Google Inktober in whatever browser that you use, then you will see all kinds of information and a list of this year's prompts. They're already always really fun drawing prompts. And someone in the Zentangle community, Stephanie, good morning, Marion. Me too. I'm super excited. And started Inktober Tangles. And so there's a new tangle every month throughout the month of October, 31 tangles. Some of them this time are very familiar to me and much loved, and some of them are brand new and really, really tricky. But during the pandemic, when I wanted to read more poetry, I had this beautiful book of poems, and I decided that I would do my tangling inside this book of poetry, and it came out really quite beautiful for the most part. And I have been looking longingly at this anthology. I have several books of Mary Oliver's poems and had been looking at this anthology. And I thought, what a great opportunity to gift myself this book that I've been wanting and to play with Inktober Tangles as well. And what I love about this process, I call it poetry journaling or poetry tangling. It allows me to read a poem a day, to really zero in on that poem, to notice the words in the poem as I'm adding the Zentangle patterns. So together we're going to work through this. I've already started practicing, but I think I want to go ahead and start. I'm going to change my camera at the beginning with all of you. So if you love Mary Oliver, Tori, good morning. Staying home today, awesome. So pardon me, man, these summer colds are the worst. So last week, I have to share, I was on the most beautiful retreat with my mentor, Kat Carasello, at the Art and Soul Equinox Retreat at Camp Lucy in Texas. And it was so amazing, and it sucked to be have this head cold all the way through, but what it did was allowed me space to be really introspective. I wasn't feeling my normal extroverted, outgoing self. So I made so much art collage specifically and have all kinds of fun ideas. And it was in Bernie, Texas, this beautiful little town very close to where my dad lives in the Texas Hill Country, in a gorgeous little independent bookstore, the Bernie Bookshop. And I said, "Where's your poetry section?" And it was under the counter where the cash register was, and it was maybe two shelves, and they actually had two copies of Mary Oliver's book, Devotions. And so I also, on while I was gone, started practicing with all of this was a really tricky one that I kept messing up. Kept practicing or started practicing. I hand drew all 31 of this month's tangles because they're tricky, 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 but there's some really, really beautiful ones, and I can't wait to share with them and help spread the word about Inktober Tangles and my love of Mary Oliver poetry. So today's tangle is Be Light. And it is a really simple pattern that I absolutely love. It's a classic pattern created by Zentangle Ink. And that is where we're going to start today. I'm going to show you one that I've already done, and then I'm going to probably pick another poem and start a second one. So this one I let flow across both of the pages. And for any of you that think it might be sacrilegious to write in your books, I disagree. For me, my books are very much lived things, and the more that I draw and write and underline, then the more that I'm actually reading and experiencing the book. So many books get tossed away. They won't take them back at libraries or used bookstores these days. And so for me, this is a way to feel like I'm really deeply interacting with the book in a way that is meaningful and impactful to me. I really loved these first two poems, but I kind of felt like, wouldn't it be fun to just start afresh? So I'm going to randomly pick a poem. This one is called The Dipper by Mary Oliver. I'm going to read the poem, and then we're going to practice drawing bee light together on the page. And if you're brand new to Zentangle, what I love about Zentangle, this is a busy month for me, so I knew I needed something very simple. And I apologize, I got to get Brad down here to kind of fix my focus again. After being away for a week, I swear the camera takes on a life of its own. Very simple tools. So a little tortillon, or it's fondly called a smudge stick. It's just a little twisted bit of paper, often used in pastels and drawing for smudging pencil. We need a pencil, no eraser, because there are no mistakes in Zentangle, and a micron pen. My favorites are an O1 and an O5. I also really love the PN, which has a nice rubber nib. So a couple of permanent fine line pen. Oh, great. Thank you, Marion, for telling me that. Are all the things we need. And we always want to approach the Zentangle method with gratitude for our beautiful materials, with a moment of mindfulness and catching our breath. I feel like since I came back from Texas on Saturday afternoon, I spent most of the day Sunday on the sofa resting and rewatching Harry Potter, which has been really fun. Um, but I really haven't had time to catch my breath, and I turn around and leave again to tomorrow afternoon. So this is my only live for the week, but I'm gonna record a couple of the other days and get them up on the channel today. And just slowing down. I think Zentangle, what I wanted to say was that Zentangle just reminds us to slow down. And it's so reminiscent. My approach to Zentangle is the same as my approach to our sacred circles process of coloring mandalas. And it's slowing down. It's choosing my materials with care. It's taking my time, knowing I'm not in a rush, that I have all the time I need just to be here now with the page. So the way that I approach this idea of poetry journaling or poetry tangling is with a little bit of gratitude, a lot of gratitude, a little bit of reverence, and taking a moment to read the poem, trusting it's exactly the poem that I need today. There is always a message in each of Mary Oliver's poems. And what I really appreciate about Mary Oliver's poetry and about the practice of Zentangle is how accessible they are for all, right? Like there is ease, there's not obfuscated language in her poetry, it's not archaic, it feels very new, very present, and it really speaks to my heart personally. And then there's Zentangle with its mindful, simple drawing one stroke at a time that makes it possible for anyone to really believe they can draw. And so I was also pulled in this month to ease and a little bit of accessibility. So let's get going. That was a lot of talking today. The Dipper by Mary Oliver. Once I saw in a quick falling white veined stream among the leafed islands of the wet rocks a small bird, and knew it from the pages of a book. It was the dipper, and dipping he was, as well as sometimes on a rock peak, starting up the clear, strong pipe of his voice. At this, there being no words to transcribe, I had to bend forward, as it were, into his frame of mind, catching everything I could in the tone, cadence, sweetness, and briskness of his affirmative report. Though not by words, it was a more than satisfactory way to the bridge of understanding. This happened in Colorado more than half a century ago, more certainly than half my lifetime ago. And just as certainly, he has been sleeping for decades in the leaves beside the stream, his crumble of white bones, his curl of flesh, comfortable even so. The Dipper by Mary Oliver. And as always, there's no mistakes. I have so many memories of places where I've sat by streams in Colorado, on trails, favorite picnic areas, watching dippers. On a picnic early in the spring before the trees were out, we saw one, and he kept flying across the river to feed his young, or she did, and then he would come back to catch bugs and land on the stones and fallen logs right at our feet. And they are delightful little birds. They're fairly nondescript if you see a picture of them, but in action, they are quite marvelous. And one of the themes here that I'm noticing is seeing and listening, right? She's tuning in, she's leaning forward. And as we go about our busy day today, what might shift or change for you if you lean in a little bit more? If you listen for the tone, the cadence, the sweetness, the briskness, even though it's not the words, what else are you listening for? What bridge of understanding could you be building today? And that bridge might be between you and something outside of you, or that bridge might be between you and yourself, or between you and your connection to spirit. So, a simple poem, always with Mary Oliver, with profound reminders of how we go on. All right, so Be Light, I think I'm going to draw a little string here, is a really lovely, simple pattern. And I think I want it to sort of remind me of that dipper and that flow of the spring, that quick falling white vein stream. So maybe my string is going to be very simple here today. And I'm going to take my O1 and I am going to make a grid. I'm going to fill this whole thing with a grid. Zoom out just a little bit. But it's going to be a grid on the diagonal, so it's a little bit of a different grid. These lines are going to be diagonal and curved. And I can vary with this pattern how large or small that grid is. I'm going to make it relatively large today. And I think I might need to draw a little dipper on the page as well. And then I'm going to turn my page as we do with Zentangle to make it just easier to draw that grid and figure out which way feels most comfortable for my hand. And I'm going to draw the opposite lines of my grid. And it ends up, rather than creating a grid of squares, as if I'm creating a grid maybe of some sparkling diamond shapes. And so there we have our very simple excuse me, diagonal grid for Be Light. And then inside one corner of each of these, all going in the same direction, we're going to draw a little ladybug or half moon shape. And again, my goal is to really slow down, to take my time, to pause, and to make them more or less symmetrical. I'm human. My spaces are all different, so I don't expect them to be exactly the same, but more or less. And I'm just going into that same corner in each of my spaces here, even where they kind of go off this page. This will be one here as well, and there'll be one here as well. And then I am going to blacken in each of these little half circles. I'm going to grab my PN. If I had an 05 sitting here, I would use an 05. And I'm just going to slowly and mindfully take my time to blacken in each of these spaces. And one of the things that I love about the Inktober Tangles is all the different ways people choose to feature the tangle of the day, or how they will create one Zentangle design or a grid design that features each of the patterns. But I really love this idea of a monotangle, which is I'm just focusing in on this one tangle pattern. Letting it be the showstopper. It keeps it a little bit simple so that my focus stays on both the drawing and the poem. And every once in a while we have to stop and stretch our hand, maybe look at our poem again. And I notice every time I look at it, a different line jumps out at me. She knew the bird from the pages of a book, so maybe this was her first time seeing the bird. That pen is dying. Hi, Georgia. You gonna come say hi? Good morning. Nothing like a purring kitty in your lap. All right, I'm wanting this to go just a little bit faster. So let's see what else we got here. And I love for these spaces to be nice and black, very inky. You see her whiskers sticking out there. That one's probably going to bleed through on the other side, but it's all good. I might have to rename my series Mary Oliver, Zentangle, and Georgia. She's half in my lap, half on the table in front of me. She's trying to see the best way to get my attention. So I'm just mindfully taking my time. Yes, I see you, silly girl. All right, if you get too pushy, you're going to have to go. And I love watching the pattern unfold down the page, working top to bottom this way, sort of creating that, fall of the water that she writes about in the poem. Watching the pattern just slowly appear, one stroke at a time. All right, Missy. Nope. The blackened space, the dipper, the circular lines, the echoes of its motion. Yes. Have you ever seen one there, Marion? They're so busy they rarely rest. They fly and catch the bugs in the air, and when they stand on a rock on the edge of the water, they literally bob up and down. Oh, Tori, I'm so sorry about your baby. That's scary. Not fun. Mine are just glad to have me home, so they're a little extra needy. So the next step, I'm going to take up my O1 again, so hoping she's better this morning. We're going to begin to draw auras, and this is going to create the light, right? The beach plover. Oh, I love plovers too. Fond memories of all the snowy plovers, both in Nova Scotia and on our beaches in Santa Barbara. And in Santa Barbara, we had a variety of different kinds of plovers, from the little tiny snowy plover all the way to some of the larger plovers. Georgia, you're not helping. All right, so we're going to start with a simple aura. And in Zentangle language, an aura is just creating space around a design. And again, that just slowing down, focusing on getting them more or less symmetrical, and already it creates a sense that there's light around my half moon there. All right, she is being such a ham this morning. I need you to just sit still, my darling. She's like, you're not petting me. Oh, and you're drooling on my page. Ew. Icky. Kitty drool. So helpful. Kind of ruins the mindfulness of the moment. And we have some cat hair. Just adds to the effect of the page. So there we have our first aura. And now we're going to take our time in each of these patterns And we're going to fill each of our little diamond shapes. You are drooling. Go away. All right, no more kitty cats. With auras, but we're going to break the auras up. So you could do them all solid. I love to break them up because it does look like the light is shining in on our pattern. You can see I've done a few of them so far. So you can see where the lines are a little bit scattered as if the light is coming in. And that's kind of how it feels. So we have this flow of water, this sort of, fracture of light and moments and movement. So I'm just going to come in and leave little spaces in the lines as if there's some just little sparkles of light landing in each of those spaces. And I'm just going to work my way around, leaving a little bit of space in each one. And here I'm focusing less on where that light is landing. I'm imagining those lines continuing off the page, even where there's no ladybug shape here. Just letting that flow off the edge of the page. And what I know is that I'm going to bring the joy of this little dipper. Georgia's destroying something on the table over there. She's definitely in attention-getting mode. So definitely Georgia is coming with me into the day, whether I want her to or not, but I want to bring this lovely time of just mindful tangling here in the morning. I'm going to bring the image of that dipper with me into my day, and this idea of leaning in and listening and looking. And it's interesting that that was the poem that showed up. I just started reading a book called The Five Senses by Gretchen Rubin, whose work I really admire. And she has this experience of going to the doctor, to the eye doctor, and being warned about, some potential problem with her vision and making sure she's getting eyes checked regularly. And she goes into a little bit of panic mode about losing her sight. And so as she walks home, she really looks. She lives in New York. She really looks at all the things around her. And she's a great storyteller. She writes about what she sees. And it reminds her of how important our senses are. And she decides, so she's very, very structured, loves routine, loves rules, likes her life to be very simple, all by her own admission in the book. And so she said she needed something she could do that would help her engage with her senses and really understand what that means. She was, working on this book. And she decides, she lives within walking distance of the Met in New York. I'm so jealous. And she said, I live so close, but, do I go? No. So she decides that every day that she's in New York and that the Met is open, she'll go and visit. And she starts to share her experiences. So I read the introduction and I'm in the first chapter about seeing and about how she really looks at her children or really looks at her husband, how she realizes how often she's with people, but she's not really seeing or hearing or noticing And so I'm present with this poem, The Dipper, and Mary Oliver's ability to be with the world with all of her senses. And how can I take that into my day? I do a good job of that when I'm on my walks in nature. But where else could I do that? Lean in, listen, be a bridge builder. So I'm just mindful of that. I have some spreading of the ink here thanks to Georgia. We're just going to let it be. Because again, remember, in Zentangle, there are no mistakes. And I'm just taking my time. I'm actually touching the pen very lightly to the page here that really helps get those lines sort of just jumping across the page rather than, that pressure and that solid line. Just letting them go. And I'm loving this simple flow here all along the edge of the page. Imagining that there's a corner off the edge of the page there. And there we have our bee light flowing along the page along with our dipper poem and our river. And one of my favorite parts of Zentangle is coming in and adding the shading. And I love shading bee light. It's another one that is great to, excuse me, be able to add dimension to. And so I'm going to shade along my grid pattern to give it some depth. And I'm going to shade on the opposite side from where my little half moons are. And book paper is not super high quality drawing or sketching or nice mixed media or watercolor. So the shading feels a little bit different. I might not get some of that flow and spread that I would on nicer paper, but it's okay because I'm appreciating being here with all of the movement. It did work well. And again, it was that random choice. And I've been enjoying the randomness of a poem and a pattern. Oops, that has a broken lead in it there. Let's try. No, that one's too hard. What do we got? That one's water soluble. I wonder if it will blend. I don't know. And then I'm also going to just add a little depth along the outer edge of my string here. And then I'm going to come in with my tortillon and I'm going to soften those lines. And what I noticed when I was working on this is it does smudge on this paper. It just takes maybe a little extra graphite and a little extra elbow grease, but not too much. You don't want to rub too hard. Again, this is a little more fragile paper. So being gentle with the paper, noticing what's going to work we're just softening the lines to soften the shadows, and you can see the subtle difference between smudged and unsmudged, smudged and unsmudged. And I'm thinking, do I want even a little more? And what I love about this is it allows our pattern to feel rounded. Okay, I gotta sharpen this buddy here. And just brings some really fun dimension to our whole pattern, which reminds me of the flow of waves or water over rocks. And this is going to help me create that sort of undulating feel of the water. And I want to make sure the centers stay nice and bright, because that way I get the more rounded feeling of river stones, the ebb and flow of water. And if you're new to Zentangle and watching this today, welcome. As my friend Andrea says, I'll say sorry, not sorry, because it is an addictive practice for many who get introduced to it. That's better. And when you're shading, start with less graphite. You can always add graphite, but it's very challenging to take graphite away. And the graphite also builds up on that smudge stick as well. So be gentle at first. You can always add more. And to take your time, notice the dimensions. The other thing about shading in Zentangle is we're looking to create dimension and contrast. I'm not worried about formal drawing methods and where is the light shining from. Don't care. I'm just looking to, again, create that contrast, some visual interest, some depth and flow in my patterns. These little tortillons are sort of just little magic sticks. So I love the result of this, the way that it ended up flowing on the pattern, the way we see some undulation here. I can notice where could it benefit from a few darker spots. And I could even come in with some white if I wanted to dress it up even a little bit more and add maybe just a little touch of white. So I didn't use a micron on this. I used a different pen, and I noticed that it's the black is showing through, so I would let this dry a little bit longer and then come back with the white one more time if I wanted to brighten up that white a little bit. But this is another way that of just breaking up the black a little bit. And our page isn't true white, right? It is a, let's see if I have one of my white chalk pencils here. It is, you know, a little bit of off-white. White chalk pencils are really fun to play with, just like the graphite is. And I have a million of them, but of course none of them seem to be right here. Let's see what the China marker does. But sometimes it's also nice to come in with a little bit of white and go right over the top of those lines and maybe even brighten that up just a little bit more. Interesting doing it with the China marker. It's kind of an interesting texture, and it must have had just a little smudge of blue on it from something else. And it's amazing what you can create with just such a few simple tools. We often think we have to have all the things, all the supplies, and we don't. And there, my friends, we have our day 1 of Inktober Tangles with our Be Light pattern, which was originally a Zentangle original pattern, and our lovely poem, The Dipper by Mary Oliver. So I've done a couple of others already, and I will share some videos. This is Flame Flower, which is a really fun one. This is day 2 by Deb Boyer. She does great work, and with a pattern by one of my friends, Annie Oken Kwazila, in the background there. So I've done a few patterns already as I practice. I've had some mistakes where I'm like, well, that didn't quite work. And it's, excuse me, it's all okay. It's all okay. But I'm going to do some how to draw some of these patterns. But I think, and I love doing them more than once. So thank you, Tori. I appreciate that. Good morning, Yvonne. Oh my gosh, Yvonne, I saw your picture of your crazy Halloween fall fingernails. They are magnificent. Thank you all for joining me live. Thank you for watching the replay. I'm Dr. Minette Riordan. This is Painting in Your PJs live with Minette, where all month long we're going to be exploring the poems of Mary Oliver and Inktober Tangles. Thanks, everybody, and I will be back next Tuesday. I'm off to a business conference this week. So last week was a women's beautiful introspective retreat, and now I'm going a completely different direction and working on my business. I'll see you all soon. Missed you guys, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye-bye.